Today we're going to look at what gimbal lock is in CGI animation and how to fix it specifically for us as camera animators in Unreal Engine. The principles can apply to anything though. Let's go.
Hey, welcome to Real Time Workflows. I'm MX Bell. I worked on Deadpool and Wolverine, Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom, 1917, Hobbs and Shaw, Wheel of Time, Little Mermaid, No Time to Die, tons more. What you're going to get in the channel are my pro tips and how I use Unreal Engine to make films. So let's get started. Let's make some stuff. See you down the road.
Well, welcome back to Real Time Workflows. Today we're going to look at camera gimbal lock. I had this on a project recently. There's a couple of ways to solve it, and we'll go through them now. I tend to find that they don't all work in all situations, so just knowing what they all are is probably a good way to be able to fix it. I've set up an example scene here which is indicative of what I came across before, where effectively what I'm going to do is I'm going to tilt up to follow something, and I need to go 180 degrees to follow it in a straight line. And at some point I need to do this turn, okay? So we're doing this, we're following, and at some point we're gonna need to turn, aren't we? Because otherwise we're gonna come down upside down. So at some point there needs to be a twist. And it's that twist that gets CGI animation confused. So I've set up a similar thing here. We've got this camera down here, a drone flying over it. Nothing fancy about the animation. The drone just flies straight overhead. If we look top down on it, it is flying straight overhead, and all we need to do is we just want to follow the drone. Okay, so the normal way I would do this, I would come into here, I would set a keyframe where I want to move the camera, which would be, as we learned before, a camera is motivated by an object that pushes against the edge of the frame, that pressures the boundary of the frame. So that's probably where I want to set a keyframe here now, so I'll do that. And then I probably want to set one midway, which is pretty standard. So I'm going to follow it up here like this, and then I'm going to come down at the end, and probably because I'm going to lose it in the viewport, I'm probably going to do that here like this, right? And then we need to be the other way around. Okay, so that's pretty standard way of animating a camera. Okay, so we've got auto key on, so we've got 3 keyframes. Let's take a look at what it did. What happens is it sort of stops and then it swings around this way. All right, we can see that. So that's not what we want. That's gimbal lock. The camera's getting confused, the animation curves are getting confused, and there's a way you can try and fix it in the editor. So one of the ways to do this is to grab your keys, and we're gonna filter them. The filter things have changed where they are. This is version 5.4, and we can do an Euler filter. Some people think this is called a Euler filter. It is not. It's an Euler filter. So we hit apply and it doesn't work. I can see it doesn't work because there's nothing changed in the curves. To be honest, that's a little bit of a Hail Mary trying to get the Euler curves to the Euler filter to fix it. What we need to do is animate it in a different way. Okay. So version number 1 of this is animating it straight ahead, which is an animation term for basically going frame to frame to frame to frame. Now we're not going to do every frame, but we might do every 5-10 frames. And the key thing is, what we're going to do is when we move forward, we're going to right click and push the camera, and that sets a keyframe. It only sets it on the axes that it's changed, and we really want to lock this down and say no, a key on every channel there, right? So we're going to hit the keyframe button. So now we've got a key on every channel, and we can keep stepping through the animation. Keep letting this pressure the edge of frame, and hit a key on every channel each time. And we can step through some more. And now we're going to probably start to rotate around here. We can let this overtake us, that's fine. And then probably do a few less frames here so we don't lose it. Keep coming around. There it is. Okay, something like this. Then key again. And then we can come back round and we can key it again. And then we can let it guide us back down to roughly where we want to be. Key again, and then kind of let it rest around here. Okay, so let's see what that goes. Okay, so it's lumpy, but it worked. It didn't spin out of control, and the reason it didn't spin out of control is because we're locking down every channel at every key point. And what we could do then is we can go into our curve editor, and we could just start to just fix up some of these channels, right? So fix up some of these things that are kind of wonky. We can see here that's a hard turn. There we can see this. We'll see which one to soften that out. I also think we're letting it. We're kind of letting it take over. We're kind of leading it here. So I kind of want to slow that down a touch. So we'll just push that back. Okay, we lose it here, so we probably want to bring this forward as well, which means that our turn is quite harsh. So this is our turn. We could separate some of these if we wanted to, you know. So that's one way to do it, and then we can just do some curve refinement there. That's version 1. Another way to do it is to use elegantly lock certain channels that we don't want to use. So what we're going to do is we're going to just isolate it into one specific channel, right? So we're going to go to where we want the key, and we're just going to set the key on pitch, which is the channel that we want, and we're going to change its value to 180 here. Okay, but look what it's done. It's even though we told it 180 degrees in there, it's put 180 degrees in each channel. That's gimbal lock. So we'll delete these two, and now we're left with this. So come into the curves editor and go to pitch, and then come here. It's still at 0 because it's completely doesn't know what it's fucking doing. And then type in 180 here. Now we get a 180 degree rotation on this channel. Right, so the way to do it is to come into the curves and directly manipulate them. So the same thing we're going to have to do with roll, right? Because roll is the one that we're going to twist. The Z axis, the yaw, is the only one that we're not going to use for this move. We've got 2 axes we're moving in. We're doing this, and we're twisting as well, and we're doing 180 in both. So what we want to do here now is when we get to the end, we want to middle mouse click will add a keyframe, and we can rotate this. And you see what it's doing? It's rotating it. As I move it up, it's rotating it roughly where we want it. I mean, that's about right. And then so we'll just lock this down by grabbing the key and typing in 180. Okay, so now it's more or less what we want, but we want this to be tighter. So we'll bring these curves in because we want this to happen at a smaller point, and probably a bit earlier. A bit later than that, actually. And we probably want to take our pitch, and we probably want to set some more keyframes in here just to guide its motion, right? So we're going to be we want again middle click to add a key, and then we can shift drag to lock it so it's not moving frames, it just moves value. And again, we want it to be pushing the edge of frame. And then by here, this is quite a big twist, right? So we're going to do a big increase in speed to get it to here. Let's put it there, and now probably a bit more down. Okay, and then probably in our roll we probably want to bring this down, so because most of the action is going to happen here, most of this motion is going to happen here, so probably going to do that, right? Something like that. We could tidy it out. See. Okay, and I think that would probably be a little bit further down there as well. Probably get rid of that one. Okay. So now we've managed it without gimbal lock, just by directly interacting with the keys in the curve, with the curves in the curve editor. Okay, we can still smooth that out a bit more. Now, if that still doesn't work, and there are instances where it still won't work, because you might actually have a third axis in play, and if the third axis is in play, it becomes a problem. The most simple way to do this, the most elegant way to do this, is to actually completely separate out the channels completely. So if I get rid of my roll, now we're just back with this camera that follows this drone correctly, but ends up upside down. All right, okay, fine. So if I go back over here to where before the camera starts, and I add another camera, so I'm going to call this render camera, because we're going to remind ourselves this is the camera that we're rendering from, and I'm going to attach this camera to Cine Camera Actor, which is the one I had before. and we're gonna zero out its values. So now we can see here, this is the render camera, this is the cine camera axis. They are identical because this one's got no animation on it. It's just following what this one does. It's just attached to this one. So now in our render camera, why don't we go and do the same thing? We're gonna rotate, we're gonna add a roll channel, and here's a key, and I'll put 180 on there. And now that feels better, and we've only used 2 keys here, 2 keys in this camera and 2 keys in this camera, and we've got a much better move. We could still refine it some more, but we're using many less keys, and it's much easier to negotiate, and it gives you much more freedom. And if you needed to add some yaw to this, some Z rotation, you could do a third camera. Like, there is no limit to these. As long as you're rendering the very bottom one, you understand that's your render camera, then you're not actually hurting anything. You know, this is a much better way to do things than trying to fight a spaghetti of keyframes. So I hope that helps with camera gimbal lock. It's certainly something that I've fought against on jobs. And rather than wasting time, especially when you're under pressure on a job, just use another camera, stick it underneath, separate out the channels. Easy peasy. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.